Welcome to 2819. I'm Sandra Dimas.
And I'm Brian Rohenbacher.
And today we're going to be talking about the not controversial at all topic of flat Earth.
That's right. Well, it's picking up a lot of momentum for people to kind of hold these beliefs, having a lot of conspiracy theories about flat Earth. And so we just want to address that on the show since people have questions about it. And also help people to, how do you have conversations with people that might hold to that view?
Right.
So,
well, let's get the ball rolling.
Yes. In Everyday Apologetics, we hear from theologian Ken Keathley on the 6th century flat Earth debate.
In Science Faith Connection, Jeff Zweerink will be chatting with philosopher and theologian Ken Samples on how to respond to conspiracy theory, a big component of flat Earth belief.
First up is Culture Talk. Sandra and astrophysicist Jeff Zweerink will be talking about how to respond to flat Earth beliefs. Let's check it out.
Now it's time for Culture Talk, where we talk about culturally relevant topics that you can use to start conversations about your faith. And I'm joined today with astrophysicist Jeff Zweerink. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Sandra. Good to be here.
You know, we're going to be talking about a topic that comes up often, and it comes up often even within Christian circles, because some people claim that not only is the Earth flat, but that the Bible is a flat Earth book. So I would love to tackle some kind of common flat Earth beliefs with you as an astrophysicist, and just to hear some quick responses to some of these claims.
Right.
So, you know, first of all, the flat Earth debate has been going on for centuries, even like sixth century, talking about flat Earth and a globe or a round Earth. So some of the claims are, well, here's one of them. Why do high altitude pictures of Earth, why do they look flat? Where is the curvature?
You know, and so with all of these, it's kind of difficult to answer and give a complete answer, because very often you're dealing with kind of a specific situation, or it's a detailed, why in this situation does it work? And, you know, part of the answer, you know, to this is you just got to realize that the Earth is really large. You know, so yeah, you're up high altitude, you're up in a airplane, you're 6-7 miles up, and you think that's a long way. But the Earth is 4,000 miles in radius. So if you ask what's the difference between 4,000 miles and 4,007, it's really a pretty small effect. And more times than not, when you're up there looking at them, you're looking through either a lens that might distort the picture, because just even taking pictures with a camera, as you get wide angle, things get distorted at the edges. And there's just not a really large effect. And even if there were, your eye will often tend to see things as straight, even though they might be curved. So there's lots of things that play in there. But really what you want to do if you want to do that is to say, all right, let's design an experiment where I've got optics that don't distort things, where I know exactly the elevation I'm at, and I have a reference line that would say, okay, this is what it looks like it's flat. Let's go do that experiment and see what the results are. Because any other one, it's like, who knows? There may be different things in there. I mean, like I said, you're in an airplane, you're looking out a window, and it's not a flat window that doesn't distort things. And so there's lots of things that go into that discussion or that question.
Yeah, and there are so many questions about that, like being in a hot air balloon, sending drones up, and even looking at buildings from a distance, and why are we still able to see the whole building? Shouldn't the curvature start to then cover some of the bottom of that, and even a large portion of it?
Well, and those are challenging, because we're looking through the atmosphere, and we tend to think, oh, the atmosphere is something that doesn't affect things. But when you're looking through miles or even hundreds of feet of atmosphere, the atmosphere is a medium, and light reflects and refracts and does things in that. So again, it would be very critical to understand the exact circumstances, because there are circumstances where light will travel around the globe, just because the change in air temperature and moisture will refract it along the surface of the Earth. So again, we got to look at the specifics of each one. And when I've done that, those tend to work out and say, yeah, it actually really is consistent with being a globe.
Another claim is, how can water stick to a ball? So a point that I saw online, it says, we have 1.5 quadrillion tons of water sticking perfectly level on a ball that is spinning faster than the speed of sound, while spiraling around a burning ball of hydrogen at 50 times that speed, while chasing that burning ball at over 700 times the speed of sound. So either that, or the Earth is flat and stationary just as we experience it. So that's a flat earth claim. How do you address that?
Well, in terms of why does water stay on the earth, we've got to talk about gravity. I mean, we look out at the moon, we see that it's round, it's a spherical object. We look at Mars, we look at Venus, we look at Jupiter, all of those are round objects. And when you ask why are they round, it's because gravity will pull anything of a sufficiently large size into a ball. You look at all the large moons in our solar system, they're all spherical. Because gravity will pull them into that. And so you ask the question, why is it so smooth? Well, gravity will pull, the lowest energy state is where everything is as close to the center as it can get. Well, that's a sphere, that's why you get a sphere. And so unless you're gonna say gravity doesn't exist, which I realize that there are many who claim that a flat earth disagree with gravity, but what I find remarkable is that our explanation for gravity here on Earth also explains why does the moon orbit around the Earth, why does the Earth orbit around the sun, why does the sun orbit around the center of the galaxy? And you do the calculations and it just works out the way you would expect. So gravity really does seem to work the way the scientists say it works, or at least we've got a really good mathematical description of it.
You know, and you bring up another point about gravity, you know, because that is a criticism that I saw, or a claim that I saw. If gravity exists and I can drop a mic right now, then why isn't rain just falling from the clouds? Because like, how are they staying up in the atmosphere and not being falling down to the ground? But what's holding the water
it's
up?
Great. I can ask the same question. Why can I take a millions of ton battleship and have it float on the water? I mean, you've got iron and it's going to sink there. Well, the question you're asking is, things that float, things that are less dense float on things that are more dense. And we tend to neglect that the atmosphere is something. The atmosphere on every square inch exerts 14 pounds of pressure. So we think the atmosphere is nothing because air is very deep, but it's actually a lot of stuff. And so the question is, given the amount of water up there and its density and its temperature and everything, where will it float? Will it rise? Will it sink? And when we do calculations, again, we can explain why clouds rise the way they do, why rain falls the way it does, just by dealing with what's dense, or looking at the densities and ask when will it fall and when will it rise. So again, I think a lot of that confusion is written into the assumption that the atmosphere isn't something we have to pay attention to. The atmosphere is something and things will float in it, and believe it or not, a lot of water will float up there because the atmosphere has a lot of mass.
Yeah. Well, I think that is very, very helpful information, I think, for people to ponder as they're going online and exploring. I was online exploring, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like I didn't think about these things.
Right.
So, you know, I think that it's helpful to have some information, especially like the atmosphere is something. You know, we think it isn't anything, right? So when we go to matters of faith, does what one believe about the shape of the earth matter with regard to matters of faith?
It doesn't in some respects, and it does in others. You know, I mean, I have a lot of discussions. I believe the earth is millions or billions of years old, and other Christians believe the earth is thousands of years old. We can have a good conversation about that because there's interpretation of the Bible, and some will say these words mean this, and that's a longer period of time, and others say, no, these words mean this, and that's a shorter period of time. It seems like as we're looking at Scripture, there's a legitimate area of we can interpret this differently and be consistent. What we also both have to do is now go look, God reveals himself in Scripture, but he also reveals himself in creation. And so what he reveals in creation has to align with what he's revealed in Scripture because God is a God of truth. And so to someone who says the earth is 6,000 years, that means they have to do a lot more work to say, how does what we find in creation align with that? But we can have a good discussion as long as we both realize that we can hold Scripture in high regard, investigate it, hold creation in high regard, God's revelation in creation, and ask the question, how do we best interpret this? What do we reconcile? And at the end of the day, there are devout Bible-believing Christians who think the earth is 6,000 years old, devout Bible-believing Christians who think the earth is billions of years old, and they're both ardent followers of Christ, and we're both going to be in heaven. I think there's an aspect of that's true with flat earth, that you can look at Scripture and say, well, it talks about flat earth here and there. Where you get out of bounds the same way in you know, the whole old earth, young earth stuff, is if the young earth creationist says, no, this is the only way and this is what Christianity has said. That's no longer the case. The same thing is true with flat earth. I think somebody can be a flat earth person and wholeheartedly believe in who Christ is and follow and want to serve him. The moment they say the Bible's a flat earth book, that no longer accords with good Christian scholarship amongst Christian scholars who hold the Bible in high regard.
Well, thank you for that. I think that will hopefully, settle some beefs people might have, because I've heard that before, that you've got to believe this or else you're not within the Christian faith anymore.
Right.
So thank you so much for that, Jeff. If you'd like to hear more from Jeff, go to reasons.org and search for his blog, Impact Events, and also search for Examining the Flat Earth Theory. It's an interview that Jeff did on When's World on Flat Earth.
There in Alexandria, they have a debate. They have the flat earthers and the round earthers come to meet. And he says, well, if the sun really is smaller than the earth, then there should be a shadow cast, but it shouldn't be conical. And he said, well, we had a debate, we met, we had our experiments, and they held up a globe, and they did it from long distance, short distance, trying to see if the shadow actually narrowed down. And he says, he doesn't say how far along the distance was, but it was obviously not far enough, because if they had, they would have noticed that, yes, it does make a cone shape. So those in attendance considered the evidence of the experiment to be in Cosmos' favor. And so he writes to his mentor how we emerged from this debate victorious. Well, Cosmos' parting shot at Philoponus was this. He said, if anyone doubts that adhering to a round earth does not lead one to abandoning the doctrine of creation, look no further than the philosophers themselves. He said, not a one of them holds to an eternal earth. And he said, the only early church father that Philoponus can appeal to who holds to a round earth is Origen, or Origen, depends on how you say the G. And he said, he's a heretic. So, look at the company you keep. So, what was Philoponus' response to Cosmos? Well, he writes a commentary on Genesis called On the Creation of the World. He had two aims in mind. First, he wanted to demonstrate that the doctrine of creation as presented by Moses is compatible with the phenomena, that is, around earth, as understood by the natural philosophers. And second, he considered Cosmos' arguings to be the brain of an ignorant ass. And he was concerned, he was worried that Cosmos' views would be taken seriously and that his pagan, the ones he was interacting with, he was afraid they would take him, this is the standard Christian position. And he was very concerned about that. So he responds to Cosmos' handling of the biblical text as to the notion that the Bible teaches that the world is tent-shaped. He said, do you not know metaphors when you see one? And second, that the notion that the Bible teaches that sun returns via the north. He said, that is not at all what Ecclesiastes 1, 5, and 6 is teaching. He said, and so he makes the point, not only are you a bad scientist, you're a bad exegete. And then he explains the purpose of the creation account in Genesis. He says, Moses is teaching us about God, not giving us something that is a technical scientific explanation. He's writing to a general audience. And so he says to them very clearly, we are to read it as it was intended to the original audience. And let me give just a few concluding thoughts about this debate. And that was the end of it. The debate between Cosmos and Philoponus reminds us of the importance of distinguishing, as I said, between creation and creationism. The doctrine of creation has those unchanging truths. A good God created this world out of nothing. That is what we hold to as unchanging. As science changes, creationism has to change because we are engaged with the science as we know it to be at this time. Now, Philoponus and Cosmos didn't get along. Philoponus considered Cosmos ignorant. Cosmos saw Philoponus as a traitor. But the disagreement between the two was over which approach was more faithful to their mutual Christian belief. And I think I have to point this out, and this is an important point. Philoponus wins, and Cosmas loses. Now you see what I mean? Not just in the sense that he's right, but that Philoponus's position becomes the prevailing view. The early church did not believe the earth is flat. Whether it's Roger Bacon, the Venerable Bede, Thomas Aquinas, the theologians of the medieval era believed that the earth is round. And you have some who try to argue that the Roman church was against Columbus traveling west because they argued that the earth was flat. That's not what they argued. They didn't think that the earth was flat. The Roman church and their concerns about Columbus going west was not that they thought that, okay, you're going to fall off the edge of the earth. No, they thought he had his numbers wrong. Columbus argued that the earth was only 8,000 miles around and that he would be able to make it. That is, he should be able to only travel 1,000 to 2,000 miles west and arrive at India. The Roman scholars said, your numbers are wrong. It's more like 24,000 to 25,000 miles around, and you're not going to make it. Now, it turns out that the Roman church is right. And lucky for Columbus, he ran into this little thing called the Americas, because that's something that neither side knew existed. And so it wasn't that the medieval church believed the earth was flat. They didn't. They embraced Philoponus's arguments, and they believed that the earth was indeed, or is indeed round. So Cosmas's position was never taken seriously by the church as a whole. In fact, I think we have a word of caution here. Philoponus may have won too well. He was right about the earth being round, and so they not only embraced that the earth is round, but they embraced the whole Ptolemaic model, that the earth is round and therefore it's in the center of the universe, and all of the other planets and stars are rotating around the earth. Now, Cosmas shows that sometimes it's possible to be right in principle, but wrong at the question at hand. Yes, there are concerns about the natural philosophers and their arguments that a round earth makes for an eternal earth. That's not the question at hand. He was right in his overall rejection of the Aristotelian Ptolemaic worldview. But he was obviously wrong about the particular issue whether the world was round. He made that a hill on which to die, and die he did. Philoponus takes a different tack. He engages with the natural philosophers. He studies to learn what the natural philosophers believe about the world at that time. And so he is someone who's able to answer them on their own terms. So did any of Cosmas's criticisms of Philoponus have merit? Well, yes. Philoponus does accept many of the errant theories of his day. However, Cosmas is committed to a universe created in time, no matter where he thinks that takes him logically. And here's the error of Cosmas's thinking. He's saying, okay, the pagans believe in a round world, and the pagans believe a round world is an eternal world. Therefore, the world must be flat. There's the logical fallacy of Cosmas's thinking. Let's remember just how wrong the pagans were in Cosmas's day, and I believe non-believers in many ways, especially in methodological naturalism, are wrong in their thinking today. So history demonstrates that it's Philoponus, not Cosmas, who presents a better model for the Christian endeavoring to interact with science. And here's the important thing to remember about Philoponus. His insights lead to a genuine advance in the field of science. What makes Philoponus scientifically significant is that in the realm of physics, he moves the ball forward. So, I think the flat versus round debate seems to indicate that we should follow Philoponus while keeping some of the concerns of Cosmas in mind. Thank you.
Hello, Jeff Zweerink here, and welcome to Science Faith Connection, the segment of our show where we look at important scientific ideas and how they relate to the truth of Christianity. And today I'm excited because I have Ken Samples on the show with me, and we are going to talk about conspiracy theories. Ken, good to have you here.
Hi, Jeff.
So, we talk about flat Earth stuff, and there's part of me that it just boggles my mind how people get to where that is a tenable way of looking at things. But one of the things that I found that's a key component of that is this idea that there's a massive conspiracy, that the space program's a conspiracy, all of the scientific data is a conspiracy. And so it just got me thinking, what do we do with conspiracy theories? So how do you think about conspiracy theories? What are some of the key features that we need to look for?
Yeah, I think first of all, we accept the fact that there have been conspiracies. I mean, a small number of people plotted to kill Abraham Lincoln. The Watergate break-in, Chuck Colson, later a Christian leader, said that there was a conspiracy, so to speak. So we're not ruling out conspiracies right away. But I think that the bigger the conspiracy gets, the JFK assassination, UFOs, 9/11, whatever it may be, the more people that are involved, the less likely that it's going to be correct because somebody's going to spill the beans, so to speak.
Well, and your examples kind of belie that principle because we know about all these conspiracies. That's why we kind of know they were conspiracies, if you will. So that seems to add a lot of data to your point there.
And even the resurrection of Jesus. Remember, the first explanation was the disciples came and stole the body. They had a lot to lose in doing that, but they never gave in and said, yeah, we stole the body. So I think we need to take conspiracies seriously. But again, if Kennedy was killed by a conspiracy, how many people had to be involved? Maybe CIA, maybe Secret Service, Dallas Police. The more people, where are they going to meet to plan this? Madison Square Garden? I mean,
So okay, obviously there's obviously conspiracies out there.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot that are kind of almost too big to fathom, if you will. So when you encounter someone who thinks there's a conspiracy, or when you're confronted with wanting to believe a conspiracy, what are some tools that help evaluate whether it's a conspiracy that might actually be true as to one that's just kind of thrown out to make a big stink, if you will?
I have kind of a checklist. The first one I begin with is, does the theory hold together logically? Is it internally consistent? I mean, if the conspiracy involves all kinds of contradictions and clashes, I think that's a good reason to think there's a problem with it. So that's the first question. If it passes that, we can go to others.
So, I mean, can you think of any, like the Kennedy assassination, or where were some of maybe the contradictions that would show up? What are some examples of that?
Yeah, I think simply the idea of if there are various shooters. So Oswald's a shooter, then there are multiple shooters. But there's no evidence of any of those other guns. There's no evidence of any other bullets. The ballistic reports come from that particular gun Oswald had. So when there's a lot of conflicting ideas that don't fit, that's problematic. Now the second component of that is, does it fit the facts? A good theory, whether it's scientific, philosophical, a detective theory, whatever it may be, it's going to fit the facts. It's going to be consistent with facts, and it's going to provide an explanation of the facts. Again, if you have all kinds of things that are conflicted, probably a good thing to set it aside.
So if we take a look at the flat Earth, one of the things that the explanation for the facts that are out there are that the moon landing and all of the spacecraft that we have, that's all just part of, NASA filmed it on a green screen, or filmed it with the technology of the time. And, they point and say, here's evidence for that. Would that be explaining the evidence, or is that kind of, how does that fit with the point you just made?
Yeah, I think the way I would apply it is, what kind of data do we know for sure? What undisputed data do we have? And then does that theory, that plot, that conspiracy, does it fit with the data that we know? Not trying to explain the data away immediately, but saying, what do we know about this event? Then does the theory correspond to the facts?
Okay.
Now, another way of looking at this is how does the theory respond to counter evidence? I mean, almost every theory has challenges. I always tell my students, what's the best argument on the other side? A good theory is not only it's going to be coherent, it's going to explain the facts, but it's also going to be able to be pliable enough to say, oh yeah, we can incorporate this. It doesn't violate our particular theory. And I think a fourth one is the idea of how do you falsify it? I mean, if you don't think NASA sent people to the moon, if you think that, Area 51, there are real UFOs there, or if you think George Bush knocked the Twin Towers down rather than Osama bin Laden, how would your view be shown to be false? And I have found with so many of the big conspiracies, there's no way they can really offer a way. There's no way to knock it down, so to speak, no way to falsify it.
That's interesting because, I haven't interacted with a lot of flat earth folks, but a few that have interacted with me and have tried to engage and see where they're coming from. And, your idea of where is it falsifiable, this fellow came and asked something, and what has struck me is that I remember seeing when I was in graduate school that you can actually take a relatively modest telescope, one that most amateur astronomers use, point it up into the heavens, and you can take pictures of the space shuttle flying overhead and stuff like that. And so I said, what about this? And the response was, oh, that's NASA putting up balloons. It had that flavor of no matter what, there's always this other diversion or so I assume that's kind of what you're getting at. It's like it can't be falsifiable.
Yeah, and there are some things that can't be falsifiable in life, but good theories and good ideas are generally more credible when there is a way to affirm them or there is a way to deny them. And I think what's characteristic of the big conspiracies is you really can't come up with a way of denying it or falsifying it.
Yeah, that should be a kind of a warning flag almost. It's like if it's unfalsifiable or there's no way the person will say it, that maybe be a little hesitant about going into that. It's kind of interesting because it seems to me that there's an aspect of Christianity that almost makes Christians susceptible to conspiracy theories, if you will. Kind of flesh that out. I know you've written about that.
Yeah, I actually think so. Now, consider, for example, Christians believe that there is a malevolent hand behind the universe. We believe that there is satanic angels, Satan himself, angelic beings, demons. So we believe that history is manipulated at times. Secondly, Americans have a little bit of a built-in distrust about their government.
That's fair.
It's kind of based upon, our colonial experiences. And then I think another element that works in that kind of context is some of us hold eschatological views, that is views of the end times, where we believe there will be a one world government. So that heightens that sense of, hey, maybe the government's not shooting straight. I think what I would say is that could cause us to be open to conspiracies. That's why we need to go back and look at that checklist and say, hey, maybe my eschatology is a little too speculative. Maybe there's just too many people who would have to be involved in this. It would break down. I think it was Thomas Jefferson or another individual who said, 3 people can keep a secret if 2 are dead.
So as Christians, I think one of the things that's very important for Christians, and one of the things I love about Christianity is that it's not just I believe this, it's like I believe it because it's true. Yeah. And it seems like conspiracy theory, at least, not that there aren't conspiracies, hit at that notion that we're inclined to believe things that aren't true. As Christians, what would you say to a Christian to encourage them to be careful or to insulate them or inoculate them against being susceptible to conspiracy theories?
Yeah, I think what I would say, Jeff, is, John says, for example, don't believe something too quickly. There are many false ideas out there. So we're to deliberate. A biblical term that I think really matches well with critical thinking is be discerning. And so, in Christianity, we're told that there is evidence you can evaluate. And even when people came to Jesus, he said, look at the prophecies, look at my miracles. It seems that Christ and Christians are open to have their ideas tested.
Well, thanks, Ken. I really appreciate your comments. You know, it really is at the foundation of Christianity, the idea that Christianity is true. And one of the things that is a warning sign, or at least something to give us a little caution when approaching conspiracy theories, is that we want to pursue the truth. And so I love what Ken said about how important it is to be discerning, to look at ideas carefully before adopting them. I think that's a great antidote to being susceptible to conspiracy theories. You know, I would encourage you, if you want to learn more and investigate some of the tools that Ken has given, go down into the show notes and click on the link to his article. Give you some great resources about how to think about conspiracy theories, to identify them well so that you're not drawn in to something that's untrue, but instead you can follow the truth that Christianity offers.
That does it for us this week on 2819. We hope you enjoyed this episode and that it helped equip you to share your faith with confidence and compassion. And Sandra, what did you learn about today's episode? What were some of your highlights?
So much. You know, I really enjoyed the conversation with Jeff, and I just overall, I loved just how we talked about the different beliefs and addressing those different beliefs. I think that some people might be surprised to know that the atmosphere is a thing. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about gravity and the existence of gravity, some, you know, very widely held beliefs that are challenged from a flat earth perspective. Like, it's just really fascinating to kind of address some of those and to give some grace there for people who hold different beliefs and say, you know, if you're identifying as a Christian, you're still embraced within that that faith. You just hold a different perspective on whether it's the age of the earth or the shape of the earth. I appreciated that. And
I love what you just brought up about like showing grace to people. Mm-hmm. I had a friend actually message me recently about RTB resources, and we're talking about things to recommend. And he's all like, what do I do about my parents who hold to a flat earth? Mm. And before I sent them any resources, I was like, well, talk to them about it. Find out, why is this view so important to them? And start to ask them questions and kind of get a bit of their understanding. So I think that's a big first step.
Yeah, for sure.
But with that, I love what Ken Samples was saying when he was talking about conspiracies. Especially what really stuck out to me was that, are they falsifiable? Mm-hmm. And that how, you know, most things will have a challenge to it. Mm-hmm. But when you bring up a challenge to a conspiracy theory, if they always have a way around it or just reject any challenges at all, that's usually not a good sign that it's a well thought out view. So yeah, that really stood out to me and kind of even helps me to think about, you know, my beliefs. Mm-hmm. Am I open to challenges and how do I respond to that?
Right. And you know, Ken Keathley's conversation too, it was just a clip from a longer conversation, but gosh, this has been a debate for hundreds of years, even within Christianity, let alone from all world views, that people have held different views on the shape of the earth. So it's going to be ongoing, you know?
That's right. Well, we definitely want to hear what you all thought about today's episode, what you learned, and how would you respond to this issue. So how can people let us know that stuff?
Well, you know what? You can find us on social media. So find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at 2819show. Let us know your thoughts and what shape the earth is for you.
Also, if you like the audio version of our show, you can get it on most major podcast services. Just search Reasons to Believe Podcast.
See you next week.
Bye.